The Punisher One Last Kill hit Disney Plus last week, and so far I'm hearing good things. But I gotta be honest, Jon Bernthal's version of Frank Castle has never really grabbed me. So instead of watching that, I decided to revisit my favorite screen version of this character, 1989's The Punisher, starring Dolph Lundgren. And you know what? I think this movie's gotten better with age. In 1988, one of my oldest friends introduced me to Punisher War Journal. Up to that point, my superhero knowledge had come mainly from TV shows like Super Friends, The Incredible Hulk, and Wonder Woman. But as an adolescent boy, I was the perfect age to be shocked and utterly fascinated by a comic book character that was armed to the teeth and loose on the streets of NYC just blowing bad guys away. I was hooked, and I bought every war journal I can get my hands on. Man, I wish I still had those. So when I heard they were making a Punisher movie, I was ready. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see it at the theater. I lived in a small town, and I guess it never made it out to the sticks. Besides, Tim Burton's Batman came out that same summer, and that thing gobbled up all of the superhero movie hype that year. But when I finally saw it, I didn't love it, if I'm being honest. But I watched it over and over again on cable, and I slowly grew to appreciate the movie for what it was, rather than what I'd hoped it would be. And what it is honestly kind of strange, but in the best way possible. One of the things I love most about this movie is the whole vibe it's giving off. Produced by Roger Corman's New World Pictures, The Punisher has that scrappy late 80s B-movie DNA just coursing through its veins, which means producer Robert Mark Kamen and director Mark Goldblatt were working on a budget, which is why Sydney, Australia is standing in for the Big Apple. And because Sydney is nothing like NYC, the whole thing just has this off-kilter atmosphere, like the world is just tilted a few degrees off from normal. It's dark and claustrophobic. Shots are framed in close to hide the fact that it wasn't shot anywhere near New York City. And because of that, it never really feels like we're in the living, breathing metropolis that New York City really is. You don't get that gritty, urban decay vibe you get from so many movies shot there in this era, which on one hand is to the movie's detriment, but on the other, it's one of my favorite things about it. And the casting choices kind of add to the bizarre, slightly off-center atmosphere of this world. You've got a Swede playing Frank Castle, Jeroen Krabbe, a Dutchman, chewing scenery as the Italian mobster Franco, and not sounding a damn thing like an Italian New Yorker. You got a bunch of Australian actors as mob guys, Japanese MMA fighters playing Yakuza, and a few American actors sprinkled in for good measure. But instead of hurting the movie, this weird slurry of acting talent slants the whole thing deeper into that weird comic book world feeling it's got going on. And speaking of the cast, I love Louis Gossett Jr. in this. I love him as an actor anyway, and I have ever since I saw him in Iron Eagle. But his performance here just grounds the movie and gives it the emotional core it really needs. And then there's Dolph himself. Now look, I'm not telling you Dolph is doing thespian stuff here. His accent's all jacked up, and his delivery is kind of wooden most of the time, which I think actually works for the part. But sometimes he sounds vaguely American, and sometimes he sounds like a Swede trying not to sound like a Swede. But physically, the dude is Frank Castle to me. He's 6'5", massive, intimidating with that ashen skin and the dark circles under his eyes, and built like a damn Terminator. And one thing I appreciate about this version of the character is they don't go soft with him. Bernthal's version is all about psychological trauma, but this take on the character is more like an urban legend, less of a soldier with PTSD and more of a kind of force of nature. There's even a scene where Berkowitz accuses him of being nuts, and the Punisher makes a joke about it.
You're sick, you know that, don't you? What the fuck you call 125 murders in 5 years, huh?
Work in progress.
And honestly, I kind of love that. Because at the very least, this movie is letting you decide for yourself. It trusts you to figure it out. But one thing's for sure, Castle's a scary mofo in this. And the action scenes sell the audience on how badass he is. There's lots of great shootouts and fights. And because the villains are Yakuza, you also get samurai swords, martial arts, and that whole creepy Japanese gangster vibe all rolled up into one juicy, strange comic book bad guy sushi roll, which is obviously right in my wheelhouse. And Kim Miori as Lady Tanaka, that's perfect casting, man. She's cold and intimidating, but also sophisticated and extremely cunning. Man, is she creepy. Like, you actually buy that these tough Italian mobsters would be afraid of her. And giving her that odd, mute American henchwoman just leans even further into the movie's weird dream logic or whatever it's got going on. And then there's that ending. I had honestly forgotten whether this version of the Punisher actually kills Franco at the end. But when he does, and then warns Franco's son, Tommy, this little boy, to grow up to be a good man or he'll be waiting, I was like, damn, they would never do this today. And I love that about this movie. Now, obviously, it's not perfect. The lack of the skull logo on the shirt annoys people, understandably. And like I said, the tight shots make the city feel small. Some of the mob performances are pretty hammy, and Nancy Everhardt's character is underbaked, totally, and could have drawn out more of the emotion from the Berkowitz character, but I don't think the writers knew what to do with her. And yeah, there's the issue of Dolph's accent, but honestly, almost none of these are negatives for me. Even Franco's ridiculous wardrobe for the rescue mission works for me. The guy puts on a jean jacket, pops his collar, grabs an Uzi, and he's ready for action. Meanwhile, Lundgren is kitted out in leather like the Punisher meets the T-800 from T2 Judgment Day. Are these two going to save Franco's kid, or are they headed down to the local biker bar to knock back some cold ones together? It's goofy and kind of perfect at the same time. The movie is stylized and violent. It's a little trashy, and all in all, pretty damn surreal. And somehow it all comes together into one of my favorite comic book adaptations of all time. "1989's The Punisher may not be the slickest version of Frank Castle, or the best acted. Hell, it may not even be the most comic accurate. But for me, it's still the version that feels the edgiest, most atmospheric, and honestly, the most fun to revisit. And at a time when every comic book movie now costs $300 million to make and is afraid of its own reflection, there's something refreshing about this grimy little Australian Punisher movie where Dolph Lundgren stalks the sewers of Sydney, talking to God and meting out punishment for the guilty with no remorse, like a leather-clad Viking armed with machine guns and an endless supply of death's head knives. And honestly, man, I wouldn't have it any other way. Before you head off to the next video, I want to shout out my buds over at Screen Age Wasteland. Over at Saw, you'll find news, reviews, retrospectives, and all kinds of movie talk from writers all over the world. But we're more than a movie news or reviews site. We're a community of fans who love talking about movies. If that sounds like you, come check us out. You can also find us on YouTube at Screen Age Wasteland, at Screen Age Exclusives, and at Screen Age Reviews. See you there. Well, that's it for this trip through the video wasteland. If you're into karate movies, cyberpunk sci-fi, direct-to-video action, and all the weird little late-night gems that kept us glued to the TV till the wee hours of the morning, hit subscribe and join me every Thursday for a new review. Best of all, there are no late fees. Thanks for watching, liking, and commenting. I sincerely appreciate it. And remember,
have a nice day.